Left, even in a beret, it's not ideological. Uluyolo Mpiti, who is our DA youth leader. It's also next to him, Mama Unoma French, who is the DA Women's Network leader. You can't hear me?
Yes.
Can we get a microphone?
Maybe then I should get a mic.
Can somebody turn the music off? Can we get a mic, please?
Can I continue? Can everybody hear me at least? Is it better? Still not. See, the problem is, even if this... I thought you were bringing me a microphone. No, where is it?
Are you going to read off it? No. Okay, I'll give it to you now.
While we are sorting out technical glitches, if you give us a few minutes. Yeah. Are they switching it off?
Yeah. Okay, there we go.
All right. Is that better? I will try my best. I'll be quick. I was busy just introducing everybody who is here. And then I'll start again. Uluyolo Mpiti, who is our DA youth leader. We've got Unoma French, who is our DA Women's Network leader. You've got James Self, who is the chair of our Federal Executive and Federal Council. You've got Ethel Trollip, who is the chair of the DA. And then you've got the deputy chairs, Refilo Ntsege, Ivan Mayer, and then Mike Waters as deputy chairs. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Musi Maimane. It's my great privilege to be able to stand here in announcement of the DA's leadership that is here. Firstly, this Congress has been one of the most successful federal Congresses we've ever had. A lot has been debated in this particular Congress, and I want to look at some of the key issues that we look towards 2019. The job now is about focusing on the next elections and making the issues, making sure that we can get our message to all South Africans from different walks of life. I want to say, fellow South Africans, that ultimately as you put these press conferences together, generally people are impatient. They need change and they need it now. And that's why next year's elections will really focus themselves on what immediate change we can bring. What is the total change we're looking for? And therefore, our policy offers today that were discussed in this Congress took a view that says, how do we bring that relief to our people? And I want to say, there have been a number of changes. There were a number of policies that were adopted. There were a number of amendments to the Constitution that were brought forward. And I think as leader of this movement, I certainly have a great privilege of being able to ensure that this has probably been the most diverse, the biggest Congress that we've ever had in the party's history, with well over 2,000 delegates that came through. And I think one of the healthiest things about the DA is that we contest for ideas, but people want to think that people contest, just because they contest each other does not mean when they walk out they are sworn enemies. I want to say to all the people that contested ideas, it's good to contest ideas, it's good to contest, but ultimately when we move on, whatever Congress has resolved, that's what takes us forward. It also demonstrates, in fact, that it was a constructive debate around key policy intervention, the showcase of our growth in provincial structures, which are already beginning and continuing the work of growing door to door. I want to say that, as many of you would have recalled, in our Constitution, wasn't just a question of the inclusion of the clause around diversity, it's also a number of key amendments that went ahead. And one of the key ones is about ensuring that political office bearers are held accountable. What is now so-called recall clause. That clause says, in fact, everybody must be held accountable to South Africa. I think we must get past the phase where only the administration is held accountable. We must get to a point where we hold political principles accountable. In this instance, this clause is drafted with ensuring that as we grow towards different places, we can ensure that accountability is effective. Furthermore, we must ensure that we've also taken resolutions that ensure that we continue to serve our people in a much more effective way. There's a strong decision that is taken here on the floor of Congress that says branch representation will now move from 35 to 45%. Remember, our formula accommodates various aspects. Public reps, it also acknowledges branches, it also acknowledges political activism, and therefore that has been increased from 35 to 45%, which will ensure that more activists are more present at our Congress. I think in closing, looking towards 2019 and beyond, we leave this Congress as a party that is incredibly united, focused on not only ensuring that we've set key objectives, which is about setting up a government not only here in Gauteng, but challenging in the Northern Cape and retaining the Western Cape. We believe, as I said in my closing address, this election will be about jobs, will be about ensuring that those who are left out find work. That's why we adopted resolutions that focus on economic growth, economic inclusion, and argue the case that the state should only be a resource as a last employer. It also focuses on redress measures. Remember, our values aren't just new, it's freedom, fairness, and opportunity. On the concept of fairness, it speaks to the idea that those who have been excluded must be included. So we look extensively at policies that advance land reform and land restitution, and Congress unanimously agreed on that matter, that the Constitution is not the hindrance, but we need to adopt policies that enhance that. I certainly am grateful to stand and serve here, and I'm proud of the team that delegates have given to us and the team that I will work with towards the next Congress and starting with next year's election. And so, as you can look, you've been given the results as they go. I don't need to go through everybody who is here. Suffice to say that this to me represents the future of South Africa. It represents that black, white, Indian and colored South Africans can work together, that ultimately we can go forward together unanimously, committed to the amendments that have taken place, but also the future of our country. Also, I want to say the way Congress conducted itself, I thought was excellent. It shows the spirit of how delegates participate and how delegates in fact are willing to debate issues without resorting to throwing chairs or doing any other thing. So as I said, the resolutions that were left out coming from here will obviously be tabled at the next councils that will go forward. Our message is quite simple. This is about jobs, it's about fighting for those left behind and building one South Africa for all across racial lines. And therefore, I look forward to engaging you more and working with this leadership going forward. Thank you so much. You can share and take questions if you want.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I think what I will do from here is we'll take a few questions, if I can ask. I'll take 2 rounds, and then what I'll do, if I can ask for your name, the media house which you represent, and then table your question. I'll take 10 first, and then we'll go for the second round.
Yeah, go.
Anytime start. Yes?
All right. Thank you so much, Tshwane, for being here. Can I just also break down of the results in terms of who got what? I don't think we had them yet. Secondly, I'm going to divorce the 2 other stuff from the far end from this leadership committee. You are the only female. What are your thoughts about that? Part of what you did think about at the end was diversity. In terms of where there is that diversity, are you happy with the female leadership structure as it is? Thank you.
If I can just take the side, yes?
Paul from News 24 as well. My question is for Musi. Obviously, we know the diversity clause has been adopted and is now an official pillar of the DA's constitution. There was also an additional amendment to one of the principles that the party also rejected formula and rigid quotas. So I'd just like to ask you, going forward, in your attempts to promote diversity, what is that going to look like for the DA? How will you measure that you are succeeding in that attempt, seeing as the party is rejecting sort of rigid structures around race and gender, etc.?
No. Let me clarify that point. It's an important one. We've rejected racial quotas, and I'll talk about that in a moment. Clarify what that means.
If I can, I saw another hand here, Karen.
I have two questions. The one is on the recall clause. How soon do you envisage that clause could be used on any of your office bearers? We know it's not specifically for Patricia Little, but
Oh, really?
she's a good candidate for the clause to be used. How soon could it be used? And my second question is, you had lots of public office bearers, high profile mayors and metros. Give us a preview of Western Cape.
If I can take the last question, the first round.
Senator Toy from Huffington Post. What was the margin of victory for the federal chairperson? What was the margin between the...
I actually don't have the results here with
We
me.
don't give them.
Can you get me the results?
No, we don't give them.
Oh, we
Thank
don't?
you. Thank you. That's the first round of. I think let me start with the question on me as a black female leader, so that we can deal with that, and then the other question I'll hand over to the federal leader. Look, I think when you look at the diversity in the room and the people who actually elect, when we talk about being fit for purpose, I'm very comfortable that I'm chosen by black, white and Indians to serve as one of the leaders of the organization. So I'm not particularly worried that I'm a black female, because the people who selected me, for me to have white people say, I believe you're competent and want you to serve again, colored people saying the same thing, Indian people saying the same thing, including my fellow black colleagues saying the same thing. It's an honor. I don't necessarily think we must now practice quotas and say people must vote on particular gender issues and select other black people. I think people must say these are the leaders we want to elect. And when you look at the dynamics of what we had, absolutely. I'm very happy that I've been re-elected, and I will continue to serve. And it doesn't bother me that I'm the only female on the leadership panel. So thank you for that. Leader, if I can ask you to handle... No, she asked outside of Dawn in terms of the other federal structures. Leader, if I can give you the other questions.
I mean, I think, Natasha, this question is very important. Ours is to say that clearly at 400... Anything here. I think what's important to note is the fact that we want to align child support grants to the economic needs of a woman with a child. It's very clear that at 400 rands, it's below par. So whilst others have argued the case to say it ought to be doubled, I think it will be increased to be aligned with the economic needs. And those can change over a period of time. I think the job seekers grant was being debated and will be deferred to the federal council that comes out. The principle is in place. The amount was the extended debate that I thought took quite a while. Sorry. Can I just say, and it will form part of our broader economic policy that we'll put forward. Remember when I spoke yesterday, it was on the basis of three things: creating a conducive environment for people to work, developing the labor force. One of the documents that was adopted, obviously, at our previous Congress was this cradle to career process, which addresses questions of education and development of young people. But then it will also conclude itself with how do we create a safety net across the state, and therefore the job seekers grant and the national civilian service where young people can get a year's program was part of the adopted process going forward. So that will be in place. I think so that policy document is in place. So let me speak to this issue because it's an important one. The text as put forward actually was strengthened from the initial one. Because the initial one, and I don't have the exact wording here in front of me, It says, let us acknowledge our historical injustices, which recognizes the injustice that apartheid was. It also says, in the clause around diversity, it further strengthens it further by saying, not only should the party strive, it should actively go out and achieve and promote diversity in the organization. Now, there are a few things that you do to do that. The ANC's model on this issue is to say, let's take the country's demographics and replicate them through quotas into any structure. So if we were a rugby side, it's natural to then say, okay, if South Africa has got 90% black people, 5% Indian, 3% white, 2% colored, let's take the same quotas and apply them to the team. That's what the party rejects. Because in a political system, you can't do that. It would be undemocratic of me to say, okay, delegates, let's go out and let's vote just for women. Or let's vote just for these people or that people. Can't be. That's why you can't actually infuse quotas. That's why we reject it. Because the principle doesn't work. Practically what you want to try and do is to say, we've set all structures across the country. Look around and they say, if we were just an all-male structure, clearly that's unacceptable. But you sort it out in the process of recruitment. Say, go out of your way to recruit the following people, the following gender, the following race. And in the debate itself, we looked at even structures in Soweto and said, whilst the structures in Soweto may represent a particular race as an argument, let's go and attract other races so that when you go to a DA table, you can see the diversity of South Africa. But it's in the input, not the output. If you start to manipulate outcomes through quotas, then you will exercise not only an undemocratic thing, then you have to force people to be classified by how you see them. Then I must be willing to stand up and say, to Mike, you are this race, you are that. Whereas the Constitution of the Republic, in fact, makes it explicit that people can self-identify. And I'm confident that even going towards 2019, will produce a parliamentary caucus that is diverse. But I'm not going to sit here and say, well, it will be diverse by saying so many races, so many black people, so many white people, so many this. I'm going out as we will open nominations in the next while, and I want to recruit across South Africans, a broad range of South Africans, because I would never want to arrive in a caucus, in a structure that just simply says we represent one race, one gender, whatever. Let the people be able to self-identify, and then let's build a South Africa where we go and attract as diversity of South Africans. That's the power of the value. I think Democrats, on this recall clause, and maybe James can add if he needs to, it's applicable because it's in our constitution, it's applicable immediately. But it's not retrospective. I was once sit back and say, oh, well, the sin's here. We start now and we say for a public rep in a particular area, if we discover and we exercise that, and the clause also strengthened the power of caucuses. To say if a caucus has lost confidence in a particular individual, then it is the party that can in fact request that the person resign within 48 hours. So that is an important clause because now you can go prospectively and say to caucus members, if you've got confidence or if you lost confidence, because it's a debate about confidence. As politicians, you operate on the basis of confidence, and that's a key issue. And that's why the clause was put into place to say prospectively we can take the decisions on that basis. James, I don't know if you want to. Okay. As far as the Premier of the Western Cape, I can in fact share the communication. She was gracious. She wanted to be here, but she had other commitments yesterday and she travels overseas as of I think tomorrow or today. So she couldn't for logistical reasons be here, but even in the communication she was most honored. She wanted to be here, and it's the same for any other former leader. In fact, Tony Leon leaves to go overseas, so we had invited, is overseas at this point in time, so we'd invited across, and Joe Sirmane and many others had all wanted to be here, but for logistical reasons couldn't be here. So there's nothing else beyond that issue there. When it comes to the question of the margins of victory, the reason I can't give you the figures as they sit here is because the system doesn't work by saying, okay, you vote. Our constitution says if there are more than one candidate, you use a STV system, which is single transferable vote. So it's a ranking process. It's not just a binary process of say, Refilo got 100 votes, my money got 20. It doesn't quite work like that. In this instance, it's single transferable. If there were two candidates, we could have the discussion, but they weren't. The truth is there was a ranking process. And therefore, when you rank people, your only outcome you live with is to say who was number 1, who was number 2, who was number 3. Who got the most number, and that's how the system in fact works. So that's how we can't actually give you what margins look like. I think I covered all the questions.
Yes, you have. If I can take the second round of questions, this is the last round. If there's any other questions?
We didn't discuss it, I promise.
No, it's fine. If there's no questions, we're good.
I was sick.
It's the questions though.
Sure. Alden Sipia from SMEC TV News. Refilo, you know, as a young man with two sisters, I find it quite problematic that you who've been elected into leadership with a panel of just men is not bothered that you are the only female sitting with a panel of just men. Does it at all mean that the DA is rejecting female leadership, that they don't believe in their female leaders, and they don't believe that females are capable of leading? Because let's be fair, once upon a time the DA had a female leader, but now it seems to be regressing. Is that a fair comment to make?
Is there any other questions?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, my question is, if the ANC goes ahead and then its organization changes the constitution, what are you going to do?
Yes, and your question?
Alexander Panov, Russian United Citas. The question is about reform of executive.
The?
National executive. Reform of
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So your proposal is to reduce it to 15 members. That is more than twice exercise. Do you have the plan on what exactly means to departments you would like to cut off?
Are there any other questions? Yes.
Will the recall clause have an impact on Dylan's case?
Sorry?
The recall clause, will it have an impact on Dylan's
Recall
case?
clause on Dylan. Any other questions? All right. I think if that's all the questions, thank you. Let me respond to Aldrin. Aldrin, here's the thing. This is the national leadership, but when we sit at FedEx, there's a broader leadership, which include provincial leaders. If you looked at the national leaders, the provincial leaders that were called on stage, how many women and black females actually went on stage? You've got Patricia Kopani, you've got Jane Sitole from Mpumalanga. So you can't just look at the leadership of the DA just from the national leadership that is elected, because when we sit, we make up the full collective leadership and we make those decisions. That's why it's actually quite difficult when we say we must divorce Norma French, because she's elected out of the women's structures. She is actually part of this leadership. Just because we have different roles that we are elected to, you cannot divorce her. So in effect, we are two female leaders that have been elected, just for different roles within the organization.
It can't, because she is from the DA's Women's Network. If the DA's Women's
But she
Network,
serves as part of the
DA's
national leadership
DA's
of the
Women's
party.
Network had a constitutional amendment that allows them to elect a man, we probably might even see that here today.
But what I'm saying, Aldrin, I'll go back. First of all, in 2015, when I was elected the first time, I said, one, I do not want to be elected because I'm part of a quota. The same reason I've got here today, I choose to be elected because I've been elected by a diverse group of people. The fact that nobody knew who was going to come out of the leadership, people just took a ballot and picked whoever they chose to be part of the leadership.
I'll get the question.
Based on the STV and the outcome of that methodology which we use in the DA, yes, it came out that I became the only female leader in this particular structure, but it does not in any way mean that females are being divorced? Because if you look at the people that stood, they were also ranked.
I mean, I don't want to get into this. Well, I do actually. Because there's certainly one who advances the idea of saying there are too many people who are left out, and some of them, and in the main, are women. So make no mistake, I have a genuine interest of making sure there are women in all our structures, in all our leadership places. And I actually think we can't be quickly dismissive of the fact that in provinces, we've also seen the election of great female leaders. I think we mustn't be quick to just simply say, no, that doesn't matter. We also mustn't be quick to say that in executive office, we have a lot of female mayors. So, yes, do I want to set a threshold here and say, well, we'll have so many women, 50% must be women, 50% must be that? I can't. I don't subscribe to quotas. Do I want more female leaders? Of course I do. Of course we do. I think all of us, we want it as a society. And it is true across. And this is something that you've got to actually go out. And as I answered the earlier question, how do we fix it? We fix it by going out and attracting more females to get into politics, into communities. And that's what I want. And in this Congress, broadly speaking, the election of leaders has been even in all sectors, provinces, the Dear Women's Network, ADEC, MPL structures. In the MPL structure, it's led by women. And that, even in that space, doesn't just simply say only women are part of that network. It's also males and females are part of in the ADEC structures in councillors. Councillors have gone out and elected a female to stand in that space. So do I want more? Of course I do. But we've got to work and ensure that the democratic will is upheld and that we are always attractive and make it possible for women to lead in the highest structure. And I actually don't think it's a regression. Without setting quotas or targets, we've had female leaders who've led this party. And I really believe even in the future, there'll be more who will lead this organization in various structures. So I really believe that on this particular issue, more can be done. And I think I urge all of us to continue to do that. But the democratic outcome, which I uphold, has delivered this particular outcome. I think I stand with those who say that land expropriation without compensation. Firstly, I had a conversation with a number of people who were key drafters of the Constitution as to how you go about amending that and what would happen subsequent to that. I think in this instance, really, I think even in the public consultation, you'll discover very quickly that it would be the Constitution is not the problem. We have to ensure that our laws, I take the high-level panel report that says it's corruption, it's incompetence, and it's a lack of funding. What do we want as the DA? I want our people to own land in their own right as individuals. Removing compensation isn't suddenly going to accelerate land reform. It's not going to do it, just naturally. You are not going to say, okay, we've removed compensation, now suddenly everybody owns land, unless you take that land and you give it to the state, which is a totally different, that's something we will object to, because Section 25 of the Constitution guarantees the right of individuals to be able to own land in their own right. Because in future, we'll start off by saying, well, we can take land from that race and give it to that person, and then where do you stop? My view is ultimately that let us allow South Africans in their individual rights to be able to own land. The clause, just and equitable compensation, is not the inhibitor. Far from, in fact. That clause must be tested in law. So when people say to me, what happens when people can't afford that land? Then it must be tested in court. Deputy Chief Justice Dikgang Moseneke said, bring those issues to me so that we can ultimately say to ourselves through jurisprudence, we have come to an understanding where you say there's a land claim here or there's a land restitution here. This is the just and equitable aspect of it. Because my brother, you remove private property rights. Countries that have done that, you don't have to look far. Look at Zimbabwe, you can look at other places. You will discover very quickly economic growth declines, unemployment goes up, and the very people you are seeking to empower, in fact, lose their way. In fact, the very poor people don't benefit from that. So let us put together laws and uphold our constitution that say we can accelerate this program. That's what we've got to do. All the EFF has done is given the excuse we will oppose the issue of cluster. Just take one cluster alone, economics cluster. There's the Ministry of Finance, the Ministry of Small Businesses, the Ministries of Agriculture, there's the Ministry of Trade and Industry, there's the... How many ministries do you need in that space? Scrap it. Consolidate those. And sure, maybe there's a Ministry of Economic Development, which as I sit here today, all it does is produces policy that is ignored by every other ministry. So let's deal with consolidation in that regard. Why do we need, surely we should have a Ministry of Sport that's linked to the Ministry of Basic Education, so that it comes together, so that we can roll out development at primary and high school so that our kids get through. Surely we can merge the Ministry of Higher Education with Science and Technology to come together. So already we have a plan. It's called the 15 Ministries Document, and I can give it to you, that demonstrates that if you eliminated certain contradictions in clusters and then brought them together under single ministries, you'll be able to do so. One of the key proponents is to say you don't need an exclusive ministry that deals with state-owned enterprises. You could rather take the state-owned enterprises and let them report to their respective ministries. So you can take the Ministry of Energy, let ESCOM report there. Because at this point in time, ESCOM responds to state-owned enterprises and they get a mandate, and then they go to the Ministry of Energy and get a different mandate. So the integrated resource plan that comes from the Ministry of Energy is not incorporated in what state-owned enterprises do, and so you end up with wastage. What we are here to ask for is that consolidate, become more effective. I would have hoped that President Cyril Ramaphosa would have done that. But because of political considerations and the fact that actually President Zuma still has power in the party, he's kept all the ministers together so that they become one happy family that continues in the way things have always done. We could save, just by reducing that alone, we would be introducing into the fiscus at least well over 7 billion rands that we could use for other resources. So it's a crucial matter that we get right. Even if you don't agree with the principle, take the financial question on it, and you'll realize that the financial question for it is far more critical in this issue. Maybe you want to talk about this clause.
No, sorry, I didn't quite hear it. Yeah, as I think Musi said earlier, this clause will not be applied retroactively. But it will be applied prospectively, which means that any one of our office bearers who acts in a way that harms the interests of the party may very well find themselves facing this procedure. And the procedure is that a caucus of the DA in any particular structure of government would need to come to the federal executive and make a case about why they have lost confidence in their leadership. And we would have to apply our minds as to whether that was a result of poor governance or just a personality thing. If we gave permission for them to introduce a motion of no confidence, the caucus would meet and the caucus would take a decision about whether it had confidence in the caucus leader. In that circumstance, it then comes back to the federal executive. The federal executive says to the mayor or the premier or the president, whoever it is, that your caucus has lost confidence in you. You now have the opportunity to make representations about why you should not resign. And if the incumbent refuses to resign, then 48 hours later, his or her membership ceases. Now, I'm not suggesting it's particularly applicable to any circumstance, but we have had in the past cases where office bearers of the elected through the DA have caused tremendous brand damage. I can talk about George, I can talk about Huntam, and there's nothing we could do about that situation. We're now in a position where we can take political responsibility for the performance of our public representatives at all levels.
Thank you very much. That brings us to the end, and thanks for all your time, and go well.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming. Can I just say, I know I'm not supposed to say this, but to all the members of the media, thank you for covering this conference. We want to open it easy for you and make it possible. Thank you.